Welcome back, everyone. Here we are at the last Sunday of April. I don't know if you're surprised as I am about that, but it's amazing how the year is flying by. So we are back here with our fabulous panel, Jim Porter, John Bonsall, Karen Elkins, Ken Pearson. And so we are diving into the second part of Lesson 43 in Unit 10. Unit 11. We're on Unit 11. Forgive me. Thank you, John. I have all these units in my head. So on the second part of Lesson 43 for Unit 11. And just wanted to ask each one of the panelists right quick, give me one short sentence about what stood out to you when you were studying and preparing for this week. John?
Well, what stood out for me was last week when you identified how many different diagrams are in this unit. And for those that like to play with numerology, here we are in Unit 11, a master number. So it's like a master course going into the cosmos.
Oh, that's quite insightful. Thank you. Jim, your thought, and then I'm going to Karen and Ken.
What stood out for me as I go through this lesson is that even after 50 years, I still have questions as I look at these charts, which is wonderful.
I love that. I love that. Karen?
What struck me was doing some of the research of my own for how things kind of blended was how much this one end of it synthesized many things. Okay. So this one brought together lots of different aspects of it together for me.
I love that. And Ken, what about you?
I really like the part where we're going to see some pictures and imaging about space and how matter's manifested and the simplicity of it when you really get down to it and explain how matter winds itself up and unwinds itself. It's really going to be enjoyable. I think that's going to be a real good part of this lesson.
All right. Well, and what stood out to me, I must tell you that I had an aha last week when we were talking about the wave and how the fact that when we're balanced, we can calm the waves of others that are in the universe. I couldn't help but flash back to my one of my verses from when my earlier days when I was studying the Bible intensely, and that there's a verse about Jesus calming the waves. So I went back to look at that this week, and I was like, wow, when you think about how creation, in the wave lies the secret of creation, all of a sudden that certainly has a different perspective. And I thought that was really powerful and took me into what we were studying here today. So if we would, I'm going to ask Ken to start us off with our meditation as we roll into the lesson for this evening.
Okay, so we are going to decentrate, and that is the opposite of concentrate. And the best way that I've found to do that is to think of yourself unwinding. And sometimes during the day we get to going fast. We got a lot of things that are going, and we are concentrating very heavy, trying to keep everything organized. We're concentrating, and this would be the opposite. So at this point, just before we do our concentration on this lesson, we're going to decentrate so that we can clear our mind. When we do this by desire, it's not a thinking process. So as we desire to be more in touch with the flow of that ocean, and become one with it, because it is a part of you. You know, the body is made up of 98% water. So you are totally connected to that ocean. We all essentially came from that ocean in principle. So reconnect. And we do this by decentrating. Another way for me is like thinking of daydreaming. So just get yourself in that unwinding mode. When you're daydreaming, you're not thinking about anything. Your mind is full, because there's no parts there. So desire that fullness. And in that fullness is decentration in stillness. And so we're making our thoughts longer and longer rather than shorter and shorter. And I'm going to say a passage out of the Divine Iliad that kind of helps me to get into that state. It's very brief, but listen up if you will. As the glory of thy anointing light descends upon me, my soul quickeneth. Thy light is all around me. Thy light shines through me. Thy light encompasses me. I am dissolved in thy light. My light and thy light have become one. I am immersed in my light. I am in thy light, knowing thy light. And here I say, be thou with me, so that I would not be myself alone. Really connect to that Be thou with me, so that I would not be my sense self alone. And therefore I'm in my higher self, which is in the stillness, that inner voice. And we're just unwinding. We'll give it another 30 seconds to just be quiet and just try and find and desire stillness. Just let your thoughts get longer and longer. Know that stillness is a timeless moment, not to be measured. Just letting go of everything. Unwinding. Feeling my oneness with the sounds of the waves. Letting that rhythm be my rhythm. All right, come on back and let's get our thinking caps on.
All right. Thank you so much. You know, I love that idea of tuning into that universal heartbeat and slowing down. I don't know about the rest of you. Hello, Karen, Bonnie, Rita, and all the rest of you that are joining us from all of the channels. A place in the chat box. I'm just curious about how intense things have been feeling to you lately, with 1 not being too intense and 10 being, wow, it's all I can do to really stay balanced. Let us know how you're doing here, because for me, and the reason I bring this up is because this issue of decentration has been far more important for me. I've really, really needed it over the past 2 weeks. Everyone that I talk to says that time seems to be going by faster, that things seem to be speeding up, and that there seems to be more intensity in the world. And that decentration is how we stay balanced. Is it not, John?
Yes, it is.
Rhythmic, balanced interchange. So, all right, everyone, let's go on our journey tonight. We've got, we are now into part 2 of lesson 43. And so if we would, let's go ahead and pull it up. We're going to start. Now, those of you that are new, if you weren't with us last week, that's okay. Just relax into the conversation. We're going to start with the bottom of page 813. 813. And what they're talking about there, Jim, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and dive in, because it's talking about the next 2 diagrams. And it says, we print the next 2 diagrams, figure 66 and 67, to illustrate. Jim, go ahead. All right, you're on mute.
I'm off. Okay.
All right.
You would like me to finish that entire statement?
The one that's underlined, yes, please.
Okay. To illustrate the thermodynamic principle that the invisible cold white light can only become visible by extending that light in every direction to create waves. Waves are therefore formed by the compression of 2 extending lights meeting each other and overlapping in that effect which science calls interferences.
All right, so let's pause for a minute, because this is in fact the image. This is 66 and 67. So I'm going to ask the panel if you'll help us. Let's go ahead and just go into this first one. This is figure 66 that they're talking about. Here we are at our fabulous vibe board. How fun is this? Let's go ahead and zoom in here. So team, if you would, talk about this first image, figure 66, in light of what Jim just read.
Well, there you have it. There's God. Period. End of story. Why can't you see God? Because there's no motion. There's no motion until thinking begins. And so, not to jump ahead, but the next figure will make it quite simple. And there you go. God sat around one day. He was bored as hell. And he said, you know what? I need a little light out here. Let me make some fancy stars, some galaxies, some nebulas, and let's have a good time.
All right,
Yeah.
that's one perspective. Jim, go ahead.
Well, I keep in mind when I look at the black one, the number 66, that is a gift that we as co-creators give ourselves. And that gift is limited range of vision. If we had full range of vision, we would see that as pure white light of divinity, and that's all that we would see and know. But because we limit our sense range, we see it as darkness. And because we see it as darkness, that gives us a canvas for duality to be cast upon. And that's the next one. Then infinite possibilities exist.
Almost like a canvas.
It is a canvas.
Yeah,
and
the infinite possibilities are in
our universe.
All right. So let me ask the group a question, because I want to slow down for those of you that are new. So here, let me try to zoom this out here. I'm learning this myself. So it says the eternal omnipresent vacuum zero. What does that mean?
No motion.
that is the
Go ahead, Ken.
That is the zero of stillness. That is what we're talking about in meditation as full decentration right there. Remember, that's the beginning and the end right there. And that's why it's infinite. You can see infinite, right, in the space there. And therefore, if you think about how what we've talked about through these lessons is, so God takes that space and winds it up. And as God winds that space up, matter begins to form. Matter begins to collect, and it's, remember, the matter we're talking about is light. Light starts to bend. Light starts to feel friction, and therefore it becomes visible. And it so takes the invisible and becomes visible by winding it up. But it must start in a stillness state in order to create matter and return back to stillness for that infinite repetition of why we have an infinite universe of effect.
Okay. So I want to ask everybody if they would help me slow down to just this particular phrase: the real universe of knowing mind at rest. The real universe of knowing mind at rest. What does that one phrase mean?
Reality. That's reality.
The cause of everything.
Okay.
The beginning. Like Ken said, the beginning and the ending is right there.
Yep. And if you think about that for a second, oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, Ken, go ahead.
If you think about that for a second, just like I want an idea, take the script out of there, the text out of there, and look at that screen and think, what idea do you want? Desire what you will, and it will come from that stillness. And in that stillness, what will come to you is in a timeless flash as an image. I personally invented a golf invention, and when that image came to me, it was timeless. It was in its full form, and took me 2 years to develop the product and the prototype, but the image was instantaneous. And then it was about manifesting that which my mind collected by desire. I desired to know how to have a better hip turn, and an imaging came into me exactly how the body could be constructed to harness that.
So this is what you all are saying. Now, don't worry, I'm not messing up Walter Russell's diagram here. I'm just showing. You all said it's almost like a black canvas now. Yes?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll tell you, there's a good one, love. Tell me if I could clear it off there, and I say to you, can you clear the text off again the way you did?
Yes, I sure can. Go ahead. It'll take me just a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, and then I would say to you, Kimberly, tell me, how does your studio work? And that is a question, and then you can manifest the idea of how it works by writing on that board, right? How does the vibe board work, so to speak?
So let's do that just for fun. Whoops. So let's do that just for fun here. If I were going to do this and I was describing it, I would say, wow, we had an idea. Whoops, it's too big. Hold on. We had an idea that we would have this studio, and that we talked to several people about doing this studio so that we could use this studio for all kinds of things and influence all kinds of people. And we started off with all the
Interview.
mechanics of the studio. And then next thing we know, we ended up coming up with the idea of a vibe board because we quickly realized that we needed to have a board to be able to help people understand. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's an
Yes.
idea. That's exactly
Manifestation.
the way God manifests it right there. And the light of your pen is exactly how it starts.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our presentation this evening. Thank
that's
you for
great.
joining us.
Thank
Now-
you very
now-
much. Y'all have a good night now. Yep.
Now, Karen, you do this all the time. So while I put this back to the original poster, you do this all the time with every edition you do of Science to Sage magazine. Karen,
I feel like I'm following the drops. So when I work on a magazine, I have a concept that comes to my head. Like here's the next adventure Karen goes on, and then the images come to my mind, just like spirit speaking to you, and then I start taking the trails like the breadcrumbs, and everywhere I go, it leads me to another place, and I get another spark and another idea. But for me, like God said, I give it to you in images. So I see the images, and I have to go find the dots to find the images to actually present.
okay, so I actually think that was kind of a neat way to see this particular image. Anything else that needs to be said to there before we go to the next page, everybody?
I
When
think
you
the
look
one,
at the bottom,
Yeah.
line,
If you all
can
could start
call
giving
up
me
image?
if you all could just start waving at me something so I can call each one of us so we don't talk over each other, that'd be wonderful. So Ken, you would
Yeah.
like me to go where?
Figure 70. Can we pull up figure 70 and leave up the figure 65 there? Is that what that is?
We can.
66,
We
right?
can.
Leave up 66, pull up 70.
Okay. So as we go to this here, so figure 70 is
That's
this
that double
one
image there. Yeah.
right
Yep.
there.
Yep. That's 70.
Yep. So
All right. So now can we pull up that other image we were just on there, 66? The
of
still
course.
white light.
Of
The one we
course.
were.
I'm still learning, everybody. So please be patient with me.
to your left, there it is. Yeah.
There it is. All right.
I think if you double tap it, it might work. There you go.
I'm working on it, folks. I've been here for an hour and a half trying to work on this. So when I get the
There you
rest of
go.
the team in
Okay.
here to help me out. All right.
You're good. You're good. We can even use those other images right now. So what this is illustrating, and the one below it is such a dramatic sequence of effect, cause and effect. The lower ones give you a little idea, and the arrows, if you could just go to that lower one, love, and really zoom in on the number 70 there. Yeah, there you go. So we see that still white light of mind of God, right? And this shows you right there. There you go. Great. This shows you how God winds space up to create matter. And so you have a space belt. See that arrow there on your bottom left? That is a compression shaft of space. And the shaft is that centering suns that you see in the middle, right? And then the decompression shaft of space, you see it, that other arrow says radiating degenerates, right? So that's another space belt that's degenerating. So you have the 4 poles that we talk about are right there. You have one pole of space winding up, one pole of space unwinding. You got one pole of matter winding up and one pole of matter unwinding.
Okay.
So that really is the nuts and bolts of how it all constructs from that black image. You can see how it begins to form and how it creates matter. That is a great illustration of what we mean when we say everything comes from the mind of God.
All right, so let's continue here. We jumped in very, very quickly. I wanted to go ahead and jump ahead here to 814. And so, John, if you would, pull out the items in that first paragraph, 814, because at the previous one, it says the section of the arcs are thus affected, cause bioconvex lenses to form, which focus back to their point of giving out from themselves, in order to fulfill the principle of giving love out from themselves. Can you please start, for God is light?
Yes, I will. For God is light, and love also is light. The regiving of love in equal dimension is fulfilled by the fact that the lenses also focuses towards the center of the regiving wave. This dividing principle of extension of light from every point of it illustrates the oneness of creation by uniting pairs of identities into one identity. It even goes further by uniting all identities into their one source of the creator of all identities. So, are there two things in the universe or just one?
Jim's going one.
I thought Ken would jump in there because he's our divine Iliad guy.
Yeah, that's a little deep, I think, but you know, I do like the next paragraph. So when you guys share on that, I definitely would like to share on the second
All
paragraph.
right. Well, let's go ahead and go into that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ken.
So this one kind of explains that upper paragraph a little bit. So the question of these divided pairs is the why of them. Why create them? The very simple answer to that question is that God thinks. God thinks, but one thing. That one thing is the divine idea of love. Desire of mind to divide that one idea into many seemingly separate ideas is for the purpose of dynamically picturing the effects which can arise from such seeming divisions of the indivisible one whole. So thinking, if you think about it, you got a left side of the brain, right side of the brain. That is duality. When you think with both sides of the brain. So you're using duality, but centering your brain is the equator that divides the left from the right. That's where your knowing is. That's where the knowing of all life. And that center comes right down into where? What? Our third eye, we call it. So that is a great explanation of like, if you want to do something, you have to, I've got my idea of a golf belt. Now the left and right brain have to work out, how am I going to get these parts? What do I need? What materials will work? What won't work? Man, I've never done anything like this before. So it's all trial, a little bit of trial and error. Even though I know the imaging, I've got to find the right pieces. That requires thinking. That's a dual action, right? I think, and then I got to act. If I don't act, no matter what I think will never come to fruition.
Well, and I want to encourage everybody to write down that phrase, the divine idea of love, because that was probably the most interesting thing for me with all of the Russell work is tying science into love. Never in all of my life had I ever considered science was related to love. And here is what they're talking about. John, can you comment on that?
Yes, I can. So the science of love, if you will, as you expressed it, is that two-way division, male, female, the interaction of those two waves taking place constantly and forever, never stopping, never ending, never beginning. And that dual action is what true love is. So we talked about this in earlier units when we were doing more of the philosophy and so on and so forth. But love is not a Pollyanna state. It's a two-way motion of giving and re-giving. It's just not a one-way principle. So in order to be given, you have to give, or to be re-given. And it's a two-way exchange. So I just wanted to make sure our audience is aware that it is a two-way expression.
Okay. All right.
You know what I think of, Kimberly, is where in the, I mean, there's so many cultures that it's just one way, it's more masculine oriented than the feminine. And it's like, where did we get so off center with that? It just makes me.
Well, and I'm going to comment on that, Karen, because I had an interesting conversation this week too. Ken, you wanted to add something before I comment?
Yeah, I think I want to just emphasize a little bit more about that love and desire and how they're one, right? I love golf and I desire to manifest something that would help my golf be better. So desire is gravitational force. So learning to harness your own desires is really important. That's what these lessons are all about what everybody has unique desires and has unique love. Your love is expressed. Love is the same thing, but it is, as John said, it's a giving and re-giving. So, but desire force to me is very important to learn how to harness desire. And that's what meditation's about. It's about learning to enter that state of desire. What do I desire? Stillness. And that in that stillness, I can conceive idea. Ideally, you would concentrate, then you would decentrate. And the desire force to me is a very important thing to talk about, because that's how everything you bring in your life, whether you desire fear or worry or being broke or things going wrong, if you keep thinking about it, the universe believes that's your desire. And that's where we're learning about this thought wave universe. If you think about, I'm grateful, I love a good life, I have so many great things, well, then you're now in a positive world of love. If you, and your desire for us will bring more good things as you think. More gratitude adds to gratitude. Negativity adds to negativity. So if you're pessimistic, you're in remission, or you're remorseful, then that's what you're going to bring into your life, and you don't even realize you're desiring it in by contemplating it, by continuing to think on it. So whatever you think about will manifest itself in your life. It is the desire force.
All right, so let's go on down to the bottom of page 814 here. And this was a paragraph. I'm going to share it with the team if you don't mind, because this was a paragraph out of this lesson. No, keep going right there where I have it highlighted, where I have the word wow, right? This one was especially meaningful to me. And so I want to say hello to Bonnie, Kenneth, Judy, Bruno, Diane, Karen. So good to see you all. So this is what the paragraph says. Since God is light, notice light is in all caps. There is no other way of expressing the Creator's one idea than in making use of the one thing, light, as the silent language needed to express those many ideas. Just as man needs words of sound to express his many ideas. We have referred to the soundless language of light in previous lessons. Described how an apple, lemon, or tree of different species have meanings of their own, and how they convey these meanings of their identities by their form, their color, their odor, and other unchangeable qualities. And also how each one of these separate identities loses its separate identity in each other, and all of them lose their collective identities in each other. Thus is established the fact of universal oneness of all identities. The supreme fact of universal oneness is the most difficult idea to fully comprehend. Okay, so I wanted to start here because stop here for just a moment, because for those of you that are new, Jim, if you would just give everybody a 60-second snapshot. I mean, because Walter Russell's signature book, Jim, is he still with us? Did we lose him?
He's not on right now, love.
All right. So, John, if you would give us just a 60-second for anybody who's new, because this idea of the universal one is the reason that Walter Russell named his signature book the Universal One.
Absolutely. He didn't say the universal two.
So for anybody new watching tonight that's never heard about Walter Russell, give us 60 seconds about what this book was.
The Universal One was written. It took Dr. Russell 7 years to write the Universal One, and he began this after his grand illumination. 1921. I believe I'm correct in saying that.
I'm going to check the numbers. Keep talking.
And then it was presented. I think he finished it in 26, and then he gave it to the world. I think he gave it to the world in 1927. So the Universal One. So from beginning to end, in that book, Dr. Russell explains God. He explains creation. He explains the mechanics of creation. So nothing is withheld. It's all right there. So if you think you're going to pull the Universal One out and do a quick read and say, oh, I got it, well, good luck.
Well, and John, from what I remember you sharing with me when I first walked into the museum, was the fact that the Catholic Church actually reached out to Walter Russell and told him to never publish this again. And it was never published again until after he refolded and Leo Russell had the courage to bring it back to the world.
That is correct. Isn't it? That is such a wonderful statement. You know, when we did our Christmas gala, I don't know if it was 22. I believe it was 22, and we were able to play a recording in Doctor's own voice of telling that story. How we had the two visitors from the Vatican.
We will find that at some point, but I think that's I think that's a really important part here, because for those of you that are, there's been a lot of conversation about the Pope dying just recently, refolding. And what's happened here is that the whole world is beginning to look at divinity in a different way. And I believe that's the invitation that we're all being asked to do. And so for me, when I heard that this was actually said, you can never publish it again, immediately I was interested. I wanted to know more. And that was important.
That, Kimberly. So you want to ask yourself why the Vatican would send two people to Doc and say, listen, don't don't ever republish this book. So what is that reason? Why don't they want that book published, or didn't want it published? Right? I think that's the more important part of that conversation.
Well, because it leads to our understanding that our divinity is within. And Ken, if you'll make a final comment about that before we go into our first break, please. Our divinity is within.
I want to make a comment about the paragraph. I think John did a really good job on the universal one, just kind of overviewing how it came about, what it came about. 1,000 copies were sent out in I believe it was 26. It may have been 27, but only 1,000 copies went out, guys. It didn't go to mass publications. So for the Vatican to come in, and then also Nikola Tesla made the comment of the world is not ready for this. This needs to be locked up in the archives for 1,000 years. So Tesla read that. There was another person that read it, spent, I think Doc had said 7 years. He had been a physicist, scientist, and read it and came to Doc and said it would take me the rest of my life to even begin to understand what's in here. So, and that is if you come at it with that academic type of view. That's why we've all, in this home study course, you're being trained to be able to read that book, and it's going to make sense to you when you learn this vocabulary. So if you try and read that book, as John said, before you get the philosophy, you're going to get lost. Like there are many people that are lost in Walter Russell's science, and that was one of the things for me that I came out here for, was to talk about and realize that philosophy is the most important thing. And I want to go back to the love philosophy of why God uses light. It's very, what a great example. The same reason we use words. And if you can't hear, then it's sign language, but it's still words, right? To communicate a concept, an idea. It's just that. So in order for God to communicate the expression of love of everything, God uses light. So we use words, God uses light. It's very, as the kingdom of heaven is within. What I can do, you can do, which means, and as Dr. Russell says, Jesus Christ was the greatest consummate scientist that seems to be bypassed his scientific knowledge. I don't want to go too far into that, but the reality of it is, to know God, you must know the science of God.
All right, Karen.
I just had one thought. I had read that was the first thing that I read was the universal one. And it was 12 years ago. And now doing the study course, I'm going to tell you, I thought I understood it. And until I've done the course, I feel like I knew nothing. So actually it resonated with me. It touched my heart. It gave me chills. It made me have tears in my eyes. But doing the home study course and actually having to, doing the videos that I like and having to do the research, that has made, it's kind of like going home and doing homework. And and doing that and doing the research and doing it, it's made me see it. So this has been invaluable.
Wow, very powerful coming from Karen. And I completely agree with her, because the very first day that I walked in here, I walked out of here with the universal one. The next day when I came back into the Russell Museum here in Waynesboro, Virginia, I then spent more time with John, and I left with the home study course. And I will tell you, I agree. That is part of why you see this devoted group of students come here and say that's what this entire broadcast is about, is to encourage you as new students, even seasoned students, to go back through us. But we're really going after new students, because when you go after people who have maybe heard tidbits of all of this, to me, the Russell work actually puts the perimeter of a puzzle around where everything else you've heard in your life begins to fit in. And I agree with Karen. It was the home study course that was the deal breaker. That was the one that really got me excited about understanding about this intersection of science and spirituality. And like Ken said, the most important thing about being philosophy. So very, very powerful. 2 comments before we go to break. Bonnie says this. She says, love seems to have 1,000,001 frequencies attached to just about anything. Okay.
There you go.
Love. All right. And John, if you'll read Rebecca's comment.
There is no opposite to love, Bonnie. So hate is not the opposite of love. Love is a word that says yes. Love is a word that says no. Hate just says no. So it could not be the equal to love. As a matter of fact, there is no opposite word to love in the dictionary.
Okay, thank you. John, if you'll share Rebecca's thought.
All right. Rebecca says, because we are more in tune and self-sufficient than we were led to believe, we can find answers within, not from others' personal beliefs. And that is so true. Matter of fact, that's how God prefers it. But if you want to sit and listen to somebody else's, version of their life and how they see things, will knock yourself out. But That's why in the beginning of this
John,
course,
can you put your number up on the screen so people can call you to get that
No.
version?
There you go. There you go. 1-800-HELP by John. All right. So everyone,
Yeah.
thank you. For those of you that are
Call
new,
JB.
for those of you that are new, we take a short 3-minute break every 30 minutes. That's a chance for you to stand up, stretch, let your brain relax. We know this is a lot. Simply relax into it, and most importantly, feel the love that's coming from all of us as we do this together. We will be coming back to the top of page 815 for those of you following along with your home study course. See you in 3. All right, if you'll find your way back. So I do want to note that during these heavy, more scientific discussions, remember that units 1 through 9 were all about the science, the philosophy of what was that. 1 through 9 is more about the philosophy, and units 10 and 11 is the science of the cosmos. Okay, the science of man and the
It's
science
actually
of the
1
cosmos.
through 6, 7 through 12. 1 through 6, 7 through 12.
So what's important here is that I actually chose to keep our quotes very simple for these lessons to help our brains kind of acclimate. And we'll again have a visual journey here at the end of today, but please know that we've been keeping those 3 omnis quotes throughout these few weeks, and it's very purposeful so we can all grasp. If we grasp what those are, the rest of it begins to flow a little bit more. So I'm going to dive into here, the bottom of page 814 into 15, and then John, I'm going to ask you to read the part about universal brotherhood. So at the bottom of 814 is, again, it's where it said, the supreme fact of universal oneness is the most difficult idea to fully comprehend. Humans live in an environment which includes all ideas of creation, and it is often impossible for even the greatest of our intellectuals to comprehend his oneness with all things. The majority of the human race thinks objectively through its senses. Ken, can you read those next two sentences? The few?
Sure. The few who have developed sufficient inner vision to become cosmic conscious knowers, capital all caps, instead of outer vision thinkers, come only once in 1,000 or more years. These illumined ones are more apt to be crucified or ignored as being reactionaries during their lifetime. I was wondering why I kept getting the short end of the stick. Man, John,
There you go.
should have told me that long ago.
John, if you would start with universal brotherhood.
He's laughing too hard.
Yeah, either the short end of the stick or the shaft. I don't know which one he was getting.
Ah, there we go, man. Oh, God.
Universal brotherhood.
Yes, universal brotherhood and its mutual interdependence through rhythmic balanced interchange must come into being in order to stop the fast approaching wholesale slaughter of man by his own brothers. The day has come when it is quite possible that man may not only annihilate his own species suddenly by all-out atomic war, but more slowly through fallout, radiation, and horrible mutations.
All right, so I wanted to pause for a minute because I think it's really important for us to consider where they were mentally and emotionally when they wrote this home study course. So the atomic bomb was dropped in 1945. They published this in 1956, was it? 58? What year was it, John?
51. 51.
51, it was
51.
written. Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing is when you think about how shocking it was for us all, I believe we have Mr. Porter back. We'll see how that's happening. But imagine how shocking it was to wake up one morning and live through what they lived through on the atomic bomb. I mean, the stunning, sobering, shocking, terrifying experience of that had to weigh very, very heavy on their mind and trying to sway mankind to make different choices. Is that a fair way to say it, John?
I think you're correct in saying that. And, it's a good thing that it did happen. Okay, because it froze mankind into knowing what he actually did or what was possible and how the development, they kept developing nuclear weapons, and then they went to the hydrogen bomb, bigger and better. And then, thank God that the Russians let off the largest hydrogen bomb the world's ever known, and their own scientists convinced Russia and the world that we cannot do this anymore because we will we'll annihilate ourselves, we'll poison ourselves. And during the Kennedy administration, Cuban Missile Crisis, I mean, think about it, that close. And our military pushed him so hard. There's a great movie out about that.
Yeah.
And thank God he resisted. But man, they were screaming at him, pounding on the desk, we got to do a first strike and so on and so forth. So that's how close we came. Thank God we're still here.
That is very, very true. Jim, can you come off mute? Do we have you back?
I am back. Thank you. I apologize, everybody. I had a neighbor come to the door unexpectedly.
All right, so there we go. Last time we lost your electricity in the middle of the show, Jim, so we were glad to know that you were okay. So here's the thing.
Locking your doors.
So here's the thing that's important, I think, to go down to the bottom of page 815 before we go to what's on 817. So that's where we're going. But at the bottom of page 815, it says in the green highlighted there, scroll down, it says, it is very difficult for the unimaginative observer to understand that there is no darkness anywhere except through his limitations of his outer vision. That is why this early stage of man's unfolding needs new inner knowledge, and that they jump ahead to transform him into a cosmic being instead of a limited sensed thinker. That is what we and other enlightened souls of today are giving to the world. All right, so let's jump on down to page 817, because what they say, and this is where we start going into some of the diagrams, we now print a series of diagrams to more vividly stamp this knowledge on man's memories. So I'm going to pull up this particular image. Who is the first one that would like to take a shot at explaining this? I'll go on the Vibe board as well.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it. Or Karen, you want it?
No, go for it. You might not like what I say because remember where our other.
All right, John.
All right. Let's simplify this, okay? You've got compression on the left, expansion on the right. Okay? Male, female. So let's start using the terms that we've learned all through the unit. Okay?
All right, so male. So tell me where to write the word male. Over
You
here?
can write it. Yeah, you can write it on the left there.
Okay.
In that cube, anywhere you want. Kimberly, doesn't that look like the two little balls that you handed out last week to us?
It does. I'll show everybody that for those.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Compression, expansion. So idea that you can't see idea. And I wanted to say, Kimberly, if I can just digress just a moment. You remember the paragraph we were talking about how God speaks in the language of light?
Yes.
So, and he speaks to mankind in the language of light. And that's why you have to be in the silence so that you can go within. All right. And you can listen. You can actually listen to that language of light and how mankind is the only one that's all screwed up. Right. And he gets so occupied with all the physical things and all the material universe. But trees and animals and birds and the oceans and the moon and the planets, they don't have to go through all of that. God tells them exactly what to do. They listen, they do it, and everything's beautiful.
I'll be honest with you. As a hearing impaired person, I've had to tune into that side of the world. I'm sure that's part of why my soul signed up for it. Is Kimberly, let's take away your ability to really tune into words and instead learn the nuances of the world. I much prefer a world without the words. I much prefer the nuances that come through. I receive so much more information when I'm listening to what is not being said versus what's being said.
So that's why it's important. It's important in our presentation here to keep this simple for our audience, because we're not talking to 30 and 40 and 20-year veterans that have already studied and seen the charts and worked it through on their own time and so on. And just
Karen, you had a thought?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question because you guys are the seasoned ones. And this is where I got confused because I was doing the research and what confused me, which I think terms and certain things should be understood. So if I looked up anodes or whatever,
Anode,
and they do come up with the electrical term. So you're telling me that there's no it's still all optics, but within the optics, there's still the door that opens and the door that closes. So it's like the push and pull. It's what we're talking about, the male and the female and the compression. And I still love the little toy Jim has. It shows that you see the cycles going up and the one going out. And actually, it talks about here also the idea of a, what is the coil ring? The synoid. It goes in here. So the synoid is like a wrapping coil in electrical terms, but it also replicates the different wave bands, dark light in between, but it is a conductor of charge. And what it also does, it helps create the gravity, which creates the sphere, the circle, the magnetic sphere, which is the torus, which is the thing that we're always talking about, which we're always trying to fill the hole. And inside the hole is where it's all that, where God is, where all the darkness is. It's where, and then everything else emanates from it, out of the field, into light.
Okay, so I'm going to ask John to respond, and then we're going to go step by step for all of you listening in. These are discussions that we have even behind the scenes about, so just breathe through it if you don't get it yet. John, if you'll comment quickly, and then Jim.
Well, I was going to say, stick your finger in an electric socket and you'll know what electricity is. It'll knock you on your keister. But the opposite of that is the magnetic, right? So the Tesla coil, if you look at the Tesla coil and you see people touch it, that sphere, and their hair goes out and everything, and it won't harm you. And so that's the two. And isn't it interesting that the magnetic, the female, is the one that won't harm you? Where the electricity, the male, is the one that'll knock you on your, you know what.
There's so much I could say about that. Jim, your thought?
Well, John kind of conveniently overlooked the fact that every female has male and every male has female. So yes, the female can draw on their male nature and harm you. Try to touch their children, find out.
All right, so let's continue with the conversation because there's a lot more to go. And when we go down here, over here, when it talks about man's peaceful, this is the bottom of page 817, James. It says, so figures 68 through 72, which is what we're going to go through, will help visualize the principle of creating visible light into pictures of God's imaginings better than words could possibly do. Man's peaceful progress depends upon the understanding and practice of these inviolate natural laws which govern his universe, whether he is aware of them or not.
Bingo.
All right. So let's jump ahead to page 818. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the image here because the journey gets even more interesting. So who wants to dive in for this one?
Well, that's your 9-octave wave cycle right there. And it's a beautiful diagram. I honestly, I do not recall seeing this in my previous readings. Maybe the fact that John has had it put in color is what's making it jump out to me. But that's a wonderful illustration of the masculine and feminine, inward, outward. I also love the fact that if you'll notice can you do a close up of that picture?
I'm working on it. Yeah. Yes.
Notice that the red lines on there pass right through each lens as you count into 9. And then the black is the equal and opposite of that, which is the stillness of space. So it simply repeating itself as it moves inward. So the outer rings are moving great distances at slower speed, slower revolution, not slower speed, slower revolution. Okay. And the inner ones are moving at very fast revolution at slower.
So I want to just show everybody, if you zoom in here, we have the luxury of zooming in. So yes. That says 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right
what
through
they
9.
Actually right all the way through 9, which is right. What he has here in the center. And
that's the two halves of the sphere coming together from 2 separate cubes, not one. It's the masculine and feminine marriage from 2 separate cubes at the 8, one of the 8 corners of that cube. So you're not able to reproduce a wave thought or pattern within yourself other than to reproduce the body. But when you have 2 separate male-female wave units coming together at cube corners, yes, then you have multiple.
All right, so I'm going to ask us to pause for just a minute. We ran across something interesting on a video, and I'm going to have James and the team bring this up. And this was actually a gentleman who was trying to recreate one of these. So I'm not saying what their recreation was exactly right or not, but just take a look at one individual's attempt to try to recreate this to help with their own understanding, and perhaps you'll be inspired as well. So take a look at the video. They're working on bringing it up.
Wave optics and space geometry, part 1. Start with 16 1 centimeter diameter circles across your page. Then draw 8 2 centimeter diameter circles over the top of these to create this alignment. Then draw 4 4 centimeter circles on top of these, followed by 2 8 centimeter circles, and finally a large 16 centimeter circle. Then use a compass to square off the edges so that you can inscribe a square around it, like so. Once you have the square, that's part 1 complete. Part 2 coming.
All right. So I found that interesting, team. I just wanted to pause for a moment because I'm inspired by people who want to know the secrets of the universe. I'm inspired by people who take these concepts. And I thought that was a really neat video of somebody sitting down. How many of you had a little compass like that? One of those one of those things that you can actually, what are they officially called? I forgot.
I think you're right. It is called
a charting compass. Yeah.
And I thought that was just a neat way. And all of a sudden it made this begin to make a lot more sense to me.
So for that to have been accurate, there would have to have been a descending and an
Yes.
ascending sequence to it, but that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yep.
But you know, Kimberly, I think we should point out the number 9, that how important that is in creation. And it's no coincidence about the number 9,
Okay.
because it's been with us forever. And that's how God creates. He uses that 9 sequence pattern. All right.
I'm going to
So-
come back. I'm going to come back to that. Karen, you had a thought?
Yeah, there's two things on the top of that chart where I thought was interesting. One was the idea that it talked about polarization, and the other thing they talked about was fusion. So when you're talking about the in and out and you're looking at the polarization, that's literally the flip of the two. It'd be like looking at a sock, taking it and twisting it. So you'd get the yin and then you'd get the yang on one side. So you get the male and the female, you get the hot and the cold. So that was the one thing. The other thing, when you talk about fusion and you talk about that, as I imagine that's a teacup. And Feynman said in the bottom of the teacup is more power than it is more power in one little teacup than there is anything. So when you look at the force going in, imagine that as a teacup. You've got the power of God sitting in the middle of the teacup.
So do I show them my toys that I found? Is this a relevant time to show it?
Sure.
All right. So there I am. You know, I'm always on a quest to be able to find things that help explain some of these. And so I'll just ask John if you'll comment. So what I ran across were some simple, let me go back here. I ran across some very simple collapsible drink cups. This is what this is. You can buy them on Amazon, okay? Collapsible drink cups. And literally it goes just in the number, just like that in the number 4. And if you'll take a look there, it literally, as you can see it right there, what you were talking about, all of a sudden, this made so much sense to me as we were studying it this time, because there we were, same thing. So talk me through it, John.
Well, it's beautiful. You got the male, the female, the red, the blue, and then you've got the 4 concentric rings. You have to count the silver one as 1. So there's a lot going on in those 2 examples there. And then you have to let your mind finish it, because as you're doing that, you know, you're showing the expansion. And then if you were to close them and then show the concentration, and you need to repeat to yourself all these things that are happening simultaneously. So the compression and expansion, the male, the female, the red, the blue, the magnetic, the electric, and they're all tied in. They're all tied in that sequence, in that pattern. Those 4 pairs of colors on either side of yellow on a rainbow go into infinity and back, never changing. So if you wanted a universe, if you wanted something that's absolute, that's what the Russells are giving you here in this space cosmogony.
All right.
The other thing is, make sure you think of them as lenses, and the lens is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. More compression, and so you're getting more expansion and contraction.
All right, this is a collapsible thermos, by the way. I'm telling you, it's all around us. Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about this particular illustration?
Yeah, why don't you do me a favor and put them right side up underneath that MP there, MP1, right? Your little motion
like this
picture. Okay. Yep. And we were just looking at that imaging we were just looking at, right? Just showed you 9 octave lenses, biconvex lenses going in and 9 going out. So that's the duality. Now, if you take them and open them up from that position, yep, and then put them upright, it's going to look a lot like that imaging that we just saw. So you see, we're looking, remember, when you're looking at these images, you're looking down into a vortex. So this gives you that feel of why when you look at a 2-dimensional surface like that, but because we have a little bit of depth here, we can show that that's what the vortex looks like. And that's where, and you can see how one falls and one rises in principle. But remember, we're talking about light, not plastic cups. So this is all to simulate what light does. And even that cup in your hand is an illusion. It's not real. It's made up of light. Little corpuscles and little waves of light construct that matter. So the whole universe is a light show. As Karen talks about, it's a holographic imaging, right? It really is. It's just a hologram. So, and you can know this by those two, what's a great way to say this in the lenses that we're talking about is if you think of binoculars, and when you look through a pair of binoculars, you're looking through two separate lenses, but they come in as one in your brain. So what happens is there's a transference of that duality from both eyes, right? We all have eyes, and the pupils almost measure exactly the same on most human beings. In the 3D world, that's too far. I don't want to get too into that. But our eyes take those two images and make them one in our brain. So you can see that transference happening into singularity through us. And we are, as God creates, we create, and as God is, we are. That is the hardest concept to get to until you start just trying to go inside yourself and find that stillness, and then ask a question and see if an answer doesn't come. If you have a problem, try and unwind to stillness and see if the answer doesn't come, because you can take all your dualities of problems and get a single answer by just contemplating. Contemplation is the highest form of meditation. Contemplate what you're reading. This is a very, to me, a very intellectual lesson. There's a lot of complexity to it. But again, we want to come back to compression, expansion. But most importantly, remember, we're talking about, we don't use the term electromagnetic universe like science does, because the average man, as we read in there earlier, doesn't understand opticity. But it's an optical universe, not a physical universe. And that, to me, would be the best way of describing what we're talking about.
There's one thing about that toy you have. If you look at the bottom of it, look at the shape at the bottom.
All right, hold on. I'm going there. Yes.
Turn it over.
Turn it over.
What is it?
It's a cube.
A cube. And why would they do a cube? Because it gives it stability. And it actually harnesses the wave function.
Kimberly,
Yes.
can I ask you to do something? Could you put those two spiraling balls next to these as well and turn them over?
Okay, now you want the red on the red, or where you want them?
Yeah, red, but turn those cups.
Over.
Yeah, I know that. We already tried that, John.
There
It
we
won't
go.
spin. Technically, they need
No,
to spin.
no. Don't put them in it, but just next to it. So spin
Okay.
the one that it's compressing, and then the blue, the expansion.
Tell me clockwise or counterclockwise, John.
All right, you want to go counterclockwise on red? No, I'm sorry, the opposite. That's it.
Righty tighty, lefty loosey, Bunzel.
There it is. So just watch that. There it is, guys. Now imagine that taking place at the speed of light.
All right, so you're saying this one is
Compression, that's male. And there's your female, the outward, centripetal. I mean, that is just fantastic.
All right, so this seems to be a good time as you're enjoying this. What I do want to show you, I'm going to ask James right quick. We are going to, before we go to the break here, I just want to show you something, is that we actually do have a website that we're working on for Awaken Your Inner Genius. We've got a lot more to go, but please know you can go to awakenyourinnergenius.com. And on there, we eventually are going to have all kinds of resources, access to all things for the home study course, in addition to a list where you can have all of these toys for yourself. Because I find that these kind of things are what's so powerful for us to learn more. So know that there's a lot coming. We'll have James talk more about the website before we finish. But it is time for our next break. So stand up, stretch, and we will see you in 3. You'll find your way back, everyone. Amazing how fast 3 minutes goes. Here we are. If you'll just relax into the conversation that we're having. So such interesting times these are as we're going through this. And let us know if you like the way we're doing these images, if you like the way we're coming up with new concepts and new toys. Place it in the chat box and say they're great. They really help. I want one. Just let us know what you're thinking as we go through this, because you've got a team here that are doing everything they can to make this as creative as possible. Now, we do have a few questions that are submitted that we're going to go over towards the end, but we do have a few images to go over, team. And so why don't we go ahead and skip ahead to the big image for this one, and that is page 820. So James, if you'll take a look, if we'll show that on the screen, and then I'm going to the Vibe board so we can show this and see where we're going. 820. So if you would, Jim, please read what the description is under figure 71 there on page 820. All right, go ahead.
He's on
You're
mute.
muted, Jim.
I'm sorry. Compression rings on the wave in octave formation, which is the basic cause of this curved universe of motion. Compression rings on the wave in octave formation, which is the basic cause of this curved universe of motion. I almost feel like there's a word missing there. In the center of this diagram are the expansion rings and spiral arms, which radiate the heat which the cold has generated. All right, well, I can tell you what I see there. I see the same 4 steps that you were showing with your cups.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that's a good diagram. If you can make it a little larger, you see on center where the two come together. That's the flat plane between two cubes that where the male female meet. Now you notice that when they come in and they meet, it now radiates out at the equator. That's the 90-degree angle. That's the 90-degree angle of the feminine being born from the masculine inwinding, and the feminine is born and begins to radiate out at that equator. That's the 90 degrees. Remember, in Genesis, they talk about Eve comes from the side of Adam, 90 degrees. Dominant feminine is born from the side of dominant masculine Adam.
Where do they say that? I'm sorry, Jim.
In
Where
Genesis,
is it?
in Genesis.
Genesis
Okay.
says 90
All right.
degrees, huh?
No,
Interesting.
it says that Eve was taken from the side of Adam, from a rib. You have to go back into your old Greek and find out what rib means.
Okay. All right. So, John, what do you want to say about this one before I pull up the wave pattern next to it? This is showing us.
All right.
Showing us the compression rings.
Now, so you see the little white line in the center going through the center of each of the rings?
Yes.
Okay. So those rings are on that shaft. All right. And they're there at 90-degree angles. And so that is a gyroscope. Each one of those is a gyroscope. Spinning.
Gyroscope.
Speed of light, maybe even faster. I don't know. All right. But for example, so that first ring up from the bottom, that could be fluorine. Okay. Could be bromine. All right. Yes. But it's locked. You hear Dr. Russell talk about locked potential. So fluorine is locked right there on that wave. And that's why it is what it is. And then you compress it, you move it further along gyroscopically, and then the next element is locked right there. That's why you can find it there. So, and then that hole in the center is compressed, it's closed. Then you have your carbon, right? Oh boy, I see what you're getting ready to push.
I am. Go ahead. Once you finish, I'm handing it over to Ken.
All right.
Keep going.
So just know that those two are working their way to that point and closing the hole. And then once the hole is closed, then it has to be reopened. And then in the reopening process is the death process, the magnetic process, the centrifugal process, the female. You know how negative you females can be. So,
All right, I'm working on it. Keep going, folks. Keep talking. James, if you'll bring it up while I'm working on it. James, if you'll bring up the image. Ken, your turn to talk.
Well, one thing you can see is why this is a curved universe. As you can see, as a shaft that John was talking about, it is at 90 degrees to those concentric circles, but the shaft in itself shows you how it's a bend. There's not straight. So when you think 90 degrees, most of us think, well, that's coming straight off this way, horizontal. The reality of what we're looking at 90 degrees here, though, is the rings. Now, those are the locking bars, from what I understand. The elements would be in between all of those locking points, and those are locking points that have all potential of the first octave, second octave, and all those elements within those octaves are in those locking points, if those are the locking points that Doc is referencing.
Okay.
So I don't want to complicate it. And as John said, in the center there, you would see carbon.
All right, so we're going to go a lot more into this, but John, this is what I was trying to do, was to bring, so now this is exactly what he was describing. This now explain to people what this particular image is, for those who have not been and seen this.
Yeah, so if you haven't been to the museum and you haven't been in the science section, you are looking at history. This is the very first scientific painting that Dr. Russell compiled when he came out of his illumination. And it's magnificent. I mean, you look at that. And that is the original. There's the original frame. And I'll tell our audience a little story. You know, that painting, along with several others, was stolen at one time. But God had it so that it returned to us when we reopened the museum. So we got it back, and that is priceless. So it's, but I just wanted our audience to know that that painting is just, it's miraculous. It really is.
There is a great, there's a great book I like in the philosophy.org web store, where it's in The Wave Lies the Secret of Creation, written by one of the previous presidents, that I think has a lot of these images in it. And I think did a really nice job of showing what current science believed and what the Russell science believed. But this really is the iconic painting. And this is what this is it not? So this is colorized. And this is what was in the home study course, him explaining it. Jim, if you would chime in.
Yeah, that was the Wave book is an excellent book. I recommend it to people. I think it's like $25. It's all in color. It's beautifully done. It was done by then President Tim Binder, and they did a wonderful job with that book. And it is available.
And you can also on the store purchase this as a poster to have in your home.
Yes.
So as we all have them there. So we'll put the links there. So Karen, you want to comment on this, and then I'll move on to the next image.
I actually had the gyroscope for the slide, and then I took it out. So I would like John to explain the gyroscope more, because that means it's that all those wheels are turning in those 6 directions or the 8 directions within there. He talks about the tetrahedron moving, and so what I see when you're talking about that is spheres within spheres. Is that what you're saying?
It's winding towards sphere.
No. So if you've ever held a handheld gyroscope, right? And
I don't have one of those.
Rascal, and you spin that rascal and you hold it on your finger, it stays right there. And it's kind of difficult to move that. So elements are locked on the octave wave gyroscopically at 90 degrees from the wave, that little skinny white line that you see there in the center. Okay. And the comment, I remember Leo telling us all the time, and it's in the teachings, that everything in the universe is trying to turn itself inside out. And this is where Jim's probably going to have an orgasm, whether his divine feminine and his divine masculine comes into play here. If you guys will see the red to the right, and conically it's penetrating the female, right? And then it inverts. And then that cycle continues forever and forever. So there's a lot happening in that painting. That's why in the museum, or not in the museum, but in the teachings, it says, if you in the wave lies the secret to creation. And right there it is in front of you. And you could study that for years and years and years.
You know, John, when I was doing the, and this may be incorrect then, I did take the 90-degree angles and I had 4 corners then. And I will say it looks like the swastika. It's an ancient symbol from every ancient culture. And when you put them 4 together, it's actually a circuit. It actually goes to the cube.
Yes.
Okay, so I did that right, because I was looking at that when I was looking at the circuit, and I was actually looking at the rotation of the moon, the circulatory system of your body having a left and a right side, just like the heart does.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's still okay, I'm going to call it electric for a lack of a better word. But that's, how we kind of turn it, isn't it? We have a heart pump that has a left and a right side. Our body's got the left and the right side. It's got the male and the female side. It pumps, right? But it also goes through a circuit. So
You're talking about the sinoatrial node?
Yeah, well, the heart just has 2 sides, and it pumps that way. Actually, it's got the 4 little ventricles. So yeah, it's what I said to Kimberly: as above, so below, so within.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. It's classical Hermetic principles, but it ties in perfectly because those are natural law.
All right. So as we're going through such interesting discussion, so I'm curious, it seems to be really, for me, it's very helpful to see the pictures together. It begins to make all these different parts that we have in the Russell work. In a perfect world, I would have a picture of every single illustration that I could lay out on my living room floor and put them all together like puzzles. I think that could be great fun there. So they do go into another picture, do we need to go to the picture on 821? If we'll just comment on that right quick, James, bring that up. And then I want to bring
Can
up.
I just say one more thing on that wave real quick?
Sure.
If you don't mind. You can see within there, you also see the infinity symbol right there. If you look at it, you can see it's also an infinity symbol. And then you see the hemispheric line, the equatorial line, as John was talking about, where blue goes to red, red goes to blue. The other image there, James. Colored one.
I've got it here. I've got it here.
It's almost if you could rotate that 90
I know.
degrees,
I tried to. I tried.
Okay,
I can't do it. I'll do it next time.
But if you can imagine that middle line there is stillness. That's all stillness. The transference from male to female, there's a point of stillness where it's no longer compressing, but it's expanding. And so that's the transition of life. And I believe we're looking at male, female in that interchange, in that wave right there, right? Male up above and female down below. So that's why there's so many waves, guys, as opposed to a 9. We keep talking about a 9-octave wave. And in fact, that black and white next to it might seem a little confusing what you're looking at. But what you're looking at is John. John, do you know the year that he painted that?
I want to say that was 21.
It was. That's what I was wondering. It was. So that was like one of the first. It took him 5 years to learn the technical language, science language, to be able to explain what he saw. So it took him 5 years to decode all that. But that imaging came out immediately. So again, it's sort of like the concept comes to you, and then manifesting the product that represents that concept can take a lot of time. As here we are, when you think about it, we're almost 75 years past when Doc refolded a little under that, and 40 years with Laels, 50 years with Laels. So when you think about how long it's taken to get to this point where we can even begin to wrap our heads around this is a very deep conversation. I encourage everyone not to let it overwhelm you. It takes multiple passes of 1 through 6 to where the point where this really starts to make sense. So just kind of suck it all in, and that's why I'm not really saying much personally.
The other thing that Rebecca's saying, though, it looks like the rainbow in each wave.
It is.
It
It
is.
is.
It is.
It is the rainbow. The colors of the rainbow.
Yes. Beautiful.
It is. Well, and that's what I
And
find
what John had illustrated, one more thing on that because John had illustrated that. When you look at the upper part, you can see the colors are one direction, and the lower part, the colors are another, the complete opposite, reverse direction. So you go from blue, red, blue, red, yellow, green, to on the bottom you go green, red, yellow, blue. Sort of like the rainbow. If you see a double rainbow, you're looking at exactly what it would look like. Am I correct, John?
So there's the blue going in. And so if we were, and there's the red, the red. So if we were even to look at that with our little, so we're working on getting an idea to be able to do this. But in all fairness, if we were to really look at this, it's really very similar, is it not, John? So someday we're going to have a perfect illustration, but technically it's the blue going in to create the red, and then that going back to be able to push out the blue. Is that fair?
Yep, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm a little clumsy here, but I'm trying. Okay, so I'm trying. And we're working on
They
some
are cups,
illustration.
honey.
There you go. So let's go ahead over here to page 821. I want to be sure we leave time for the questions and the visual journey here. So if we could, John, if you'll read what the description is for figure 72 there. Scroll up just a little bit, James.
Okay, this illustrates the light wave current which runs through a solenoid of wire, which helps this curved universe to be realized as such. I was talking to my beloved early this morning, as I was reading and going through this, and mankind, he makes all kinds of solenoids. And Doc 100 years ago said, if you'll just do them spirally, you would increase the power of those exponentially. But man hadn't figured that out yet. You would think after 100 years it would be that simple to just take the damn thing and wind it conically, but they still just take it and they wrap it this way and that way and that way. And
well, and I think that,
can I add to that? And remember, it's 4 steps in, 4 steps out. It never changes. So to maximize that power, it's just a 4-step conical wave. It is not 20 or 30. It's 4. That's where you still use that same creation principle to do whatever you want. Once you learn this 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, you really can realize you can work with a lot of different sciences and stuff. Like John's talking about solenoids, electricity makes sense. And what you're looking at is almost inside of what's going on in an electrical wire. That's exactly what this is, as though you were looking straight into an electrical wire. That's it. So it's got those 4 rings, and that's how electricity works in 4 stages, just like that.
all right, John, last comment before I take us to 822.
I think it's important that if we point out on this particular drawing here, you see you got the 4 white circles, and then you got the 4 black circles.
Mm-hmm.
So from each white circle is born, or from the black is born the white. So each black circle is mind, is God, and there's a resting point. So each one of those circles, as they grow and they compress, right? Just like we breathe in, breathe out, and there's that rest point. That same sequence is happening here. So that's why those black lines are in there. That's a point of rest, so that the next circle can gather its energy from that fulcrum to come into being.
One more thing, it's also like looking in a tree. The rings that make up a tree, and you'll see spatials in rings of trees, as John's talking about. So that is 8 octaves right there, but it's a 4-stage in, 4-stage out.
All right. So, we did talk about tree rings, and Karen, I know you had that well as in your work as well. So I want to skip down to the bottom of page 822 here. So these last 2 paragraphs I thought were really powerful, and I wanted to ask us to kind of summarize with that. It was talking about it will help to vision this opposition of direction by throwing a stone into the water. Even though the centripetal spiral which surrounds the falling stone is parallel to the ripples caused by it, the direction of the force of its falling is 90 degrees from the direction in which it falls. So we all can go throw stones in the water and actually see this in motion. But I thought their last paragraph was very telling. It said, if these diagrams and the others throughout these lessons help to visualize the universe and the creator of it into sufficient reality, to help mankind be transformed into cosmic knowers. So if you would, please type on the chat box, cosmic knowers. Instead of sense thinkers, our combined efforts in writing these lessons will have been well repaid. It is in this spirit that we will feel fully repaid and rejoice with you because of it.
You know what comes to my mind, Kimberly, when it's like that, not be in this world, but of the world?
Yes.
All your senses are electric. Your eyes, your ears, your nose are all electrically sensing. So if you don't tap in and, as Ken would say, meditate, be in and go into that, leave your sense body, because all of this is charged. That's how it.
Yes.
So it's to tap it off and tune in. That was just interesting. That just kind of struck me when you said that.
Jim?
That's important what Karen just said. And the meditation throughout the day is one of the ways that we can carry that desire for knowledge inward. The other and the greatest one for me is going to sleep at night. So we get questions from people, and that's wonderful that we get these questions. But we also want to throw back at you. As you go to sleep at night, read your questions that you wrote down. You're going to your body's going to slow down. Your sense of it is going to be lost to you, and you're going to step out of body on a universal scale. And all the knowledge and all the classrooms that exist out there would boggle your mind, and ask your creator to take you into the classroom in his universe that will answer that question for you. And you will be there.
Jim, that was in one of the lessons we did previously, and I forget. It's like when you're resting, your sense body just tames itself, so you're able to receive.
Yes, yeah. Dr. Russell says in The Secret of Light that most people, when they sleep at night, have illumination. They reach a state of illumination. Yeah. They simply can't bring that back into their body because the body's not ready to handle that level of knowledge yet. It's a process. So,
well, and what I find, to be honest with you, Jim, and so over the past, especially 8 to 10 years, is I work a lot to capture whatever comes to me in those mornings and those dreams, and then the morning when I'm meditative and when I go to sleep, even if it's rolling over and making a voice memo on my phone, because what I have found is that we are given a lot of these puzzle pieces, but if we don't capture them or find a way to keep the illumination, then what happens is we lose them. Yeah. And then later on, the more advanced we become in our understanding, the more we can begin to connect the dots. And to me, that's been an extraordinarily powerful understanding.
It is. And desire that when the answer is given you in sleep, that you are able to bring it into knowledge when you're in body.
Yes. All right, so there's some questions that we have from students, and so we'll get into that. But for right now, we do have our visual journey. So this is something that Karen gifts us after each session. So sit back, relax a little bit, and just tune into the visual journey to bring forth what we've been talking about here this evening. So Karen, I want to say thank you. I know this was a hard one to pull these big concepts together.
But I think, John, I did it wrong because I did call it electric when he did anode and cathode. It all relates to electrical terms, but it made me go and look what a synoid was. So why don't you can fix what would you do to fix it? So because I can fix it. I mean, is it the languaging or what? Because that's what shows up on Wikipedia.
I wouldn't change anything.
You wouldn't?
I wouldn't change anything.
Oh, you did a good job.
Yes. Okay. That last
well
one,
done.
that last picture that came up, it just hit me as it was playing how God is on all sides of that cube and how idea goes from there and compressed into being into that center. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. So thank you for demonstrating that.
Okay.
So Karen, I thank you so much for honoring and working really hard at this to make sure things are we say pure to the resilient terms, because that is our commitment here as we're doing the home study course. And that was a commitment I also made to the University of Science and Philosophy. And I also know that all these students here are pretty pure Russell students, and they even correct me on making sure I'm using the right language. And I still have a long way to go. I mean, so I'm only in my 4th year. But we do have a question. James, I'm going to ask if you would come off mute and if you would read our question, because this is the big question having to do with the cube and the sphere. And this seems we've got a couple of questions here tonight.
All right, panel of distinguished experts. We have a 3-part question from D. Tonkin. So I will begin with the first part, and here we go. If the sphere within the cube represents the still point and the cube is its structure, can we explain that life emerges from the still point forming within the cube? For example, envision a bird with a central still point from which its structure unfolds. Does this provide an accurate visual? So that's part 1, if anyone wants to take this, or we can go all the way through.
I got it.
All right.
Within the cube, we have to remember there's the mirror, right? And in the mirror is all the points of light. And as the cube begins to create the sphere in turn, depending on the speed, you're going to get those different mirrors are going to create different refractions and different geometries. So from there, you're going to get a bird, a duck. Think of it like origami coming out of a cube, creating. So when Walter Russell talks about 7,000 points of light, they're not all just still, they're actually within those synoids pulsating and getting bigger, and each one is creating a different geometry. And in those geometry webs, you're literally weaving life itself in that pulse. And so when it's literally coming out of the box into the circle, imagine it like an origami being twisting, and then all of a sudden what shows up is that beautiful image of the bird coming out in that rainbow colors, whatever color it is within that frequency band that it's in. Does that help? Does that make sense, guys? Okay, Ken's got an idea.
Ken?
Go for it, Ken.
So in the sphere within the cube represents the still point. The sphere is not the still point. The cube is the still point.
No, but it's the boundaries. The cube is the boundaries from which you actually bounce off of, and the lights.
Right, but that sphere is moving very fast. It's dense matter. So that's what we call imaging. Remember, guys, everything we see on this planet, the crucible is the sun. So when we hear this cube and stuff, remember the seed of everything in its beginning came piece by piece. It took billions of years of light projecting from the sun to put the first molecule. As a matter of fact, you were a single cell when you started, then you became a double cell and a quad cell and so on. Each ray of that sunlight was sending a new seed of an idea that had to be built over millions and billions of years. So it's not a one-off, here's a bird. Remember, it comes in many, many stages unfolding for billions of years. Our planet's 4.5 billion years old. So think back of how it started, how it unfolded. So when that bird you see as a final product, it took, again, billions of years to reach that state at which your eyes sense it as a bird.
Okay, I have a visual. If you actually take your cube and you know that one pair of glass thing, Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you put that inside, and you can see it coming out.
Let me use the blue one. I just lost my sphere. It rolled away from the desk, so don't ask me for this.
Hate when that happens.
Imagine a kaleidoscope, and as it's spinning and turning, like Ken's talking about, it's coming out of a container which has created its wave boundaries. It comes out like a kaleidoscope, spinning, generating, because every time you spin the kaleidoscope, it changes.
All right. So that's one thought. I appreciate that. John, you want to comment before we go to the second part of the question? James has another part. John?
I wanted to just, the question after the first sentence, it's absolutely correct. And Ken was
There you go.
right. The cube is the point of stillness, and the sphere is the actual.
Tornado.
No, the sphere is the
A sphere.
wait a minute here. Yeah. So the sphere is the bird. All right. And the cube is the stillness. So the first sentence is backwards.
Okay. All right. Well, that's why they sent us in the question. So, James, let's go to the next one.
All right, here is the second part. With this or another example, could you help us understand the universe, including ourselves, as a composite of multiple cubes and spheres forming the matter that we perceive?
I kind of just did that, guys. We're like the sun. You came from the sun. The sun is the crucible of all life. That's why all the planets rotate around the sun, orbit around the sun, and rotate on their own axis as individual. The planets are actually children of the sun. They come from the equatorial ring of the sun. All idea, and this is really not that hard to conceive, everything you see in the world we live in came from the sun first, and it came as a light ray. So it's transmitted that way. So the seeds are in the sun to flower all life. That's the best way to think about it. If we get too caught up in the cube sphere, gyroscopic, and all that, I think we get a little lost from the easy explanation of what we're really talking about is how it comes into fruition. Yes, but remembering the seed of it all is in that sun. So when you look at that sun, you realize all life exists there before it gets here. And that's as simple as it gets. And then you got and now remember, when we look at that sphere and you're looking at an optical universe, the outside of that sphere are two bioconvex lenses, and the inside 7 lenses are concave. So remember, the bioconvex lens is like your magnifying glass. It compresses. And the internal part expands it out into its size. So the bioconvex lenses create heat, and then the inner concave lenses expand that heat into coolness, back into coldness. So that's the easiest way I think it can explain all of this that we're talking about.
If I could jump in just a second. So what I would add to that question is that everything in the universe is operating on those two principles, the cube and the sphere. And what may throw people off is perspective or dimension, if you will. Ken was talking about a sun. Well, it's hard to even perceive the size of the sun and the temperature of the sun, right? But even a cell in your body has a little mini sun that centers it, which is centered by God. So it's relative, and you just have to kind of put these principles in perspective.
So, well, I wanted to go to this particular image. This is from lesson 41, but that's a little bit talking about how it ends up actually building a little bit of matter, isn't it? Having to do with cubes. Okay.
Yep.
I did that in the last video. It shows how things scale up.
Yes. Okay. So I know that. So for everyone who's listening, I want to just remind us and kind of calibrate us. We have one more lesson that's deep in the science. That's it. So the next 2 Sundays, we're going to take that lesson. We're going to go into the science, and then we go to Unit 12, which, by the way, is my favorite unit out of the whole entire home study course. By the time I got to Unit 12, I was absolutely unequivocally in love, and I had to pursue doing more work with this particular body of work. Unit 12. So we're going to go back to the philosophy and the essence of love. But James, I do know you had one more question, 1 or 2 more questions to ask the panel before we wrap up.
Yeah, there was the final part of the question, but you may have already covered it. With this or another example, could you help us understand the universe, including ourselves, as a composite of multiple cubes and spheres, forming the matter we perceive? I think it kind of was covered in some of those answers.
What about the next one, James?
So, all right. So this question right here, we are, let me go to it. Here we go. All right. So we always want to keep these questions practical and grounded in reality. So this one's a little more personal. So can someone from the panel share a moment when you almost abandoned a desire because of outer appearances or effects, but holding to your inner knowing led to a perfect unfolding?
Wow.
Kimberly, can I simplify that?
Sure.
It's just the thinking process, right? So a thought.
She's not asking for it. They're not asking for an intellectual. They're wanting a personal moment.
Right. I'm going to share that with you.
Okay.
All right.
So whether it's me or you or anyone, right, in the thinking process, that thought, in order for you to bring it into being, you have to manifest it, right? You have to hold it. But Ken talks about this all the time in regard to the numbers. So the average person has 50 to 75,000 fleeting thoughts a day that are just gone. They're not held on to. They're not manifested. And so I'm just saying that from a personal level, that experience takes place. Now you think about that. So we'll just use the low number, Ken. So 50,000 times a day, a person, brings the thought into being, just lets it go, never manifests it. You just go on to the next thought and the next thought and the next thought.
Okay, so I wanted to go in more personal. I think that's what the question was. So Karen, and then Ken, and then I've got a thought. Then I have an answer.
I keep going back to what I keep seeing on the board. And one was, how is the cube and the square relate? And then this could be personal. When I think of the cube, I think of the mirrors, all the mazes, all the reflections, all the different aspects of you that you're always trying to dance within. And then whatever you decide and bring to your forefront is what you actually give action to, because you have to work it. I mean, that's really clear in Walter Russell's work. You can't think it. You can think it, you get the answer, but you got to work it. So in that mirrored maze, whatever you're picking to run out and do in that moment is that action part. So I still think of every time I see the cube, it's that maze.
Well, I want to encourage the panel. I'm going to go to Ken, and then I'm going to go after Ken, because this is a personal. Can you share a moment, not a theory, not an analysis, not a teaching, a moment? Okay, I'm holding the panel's feet to the fire when you almost abandoned a desire because of outer appearances or effects, but holding to your inner knowing led to a perfect unfolding. So I have an answer, a personal answer. Ken, what's your thought?
I would go back to my golf invention. Right. I had an image come to me in decentration through desire to have that image come, and it came in a timeless moment. And as I said, it took 2 years, the prototype, the product, a price point to get it the right price point, shipping and all that kind of stuff from China, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're going through that process, and I would say that is the example of everybody who's ever invented anything, written a screenplay, and ever got it produced. There are many people that have great ideas, but they never fulfill those ideas because they lose the passion that came when that idea first came. So yes, many people abandon projects, ideas, and in that process of building my belt, the materials were very hard to get a hold of, and I just couldn't find the right material. The best price point I could get at was much higher than the market was going to allot for. So there's a part of you that wants to feel like, well, what's next? Where do I go from here? And quite frankly, I just stayed true to my inner vision. And eventually, believe it or not, it turned out I found the right material in one day, in one phone call, and one showing up at a manufacturer. So, but it took a couple of years to get there. And then at the point of wanting to abandon that idea is the personal relationship. And yes, so whenever you create anything, there will be a part, that human side, that says, well, I don't have enough money. Well, I don't know the right people. And that's not true. If you stay true to the passion at which it came, you will find a way to manifest it. And that's what this course is all about. It's all about follow through, run through the finish line. Don't quit before the miracle. That's what that to me, that question really illustrates.
All right. So last thought before I finish it up with my moment. All right. So if you'll put it on the screen one more time, James, because this whole entire course is very personal for me. And I really want to hone in on a couple of words. And when you almost abandoned a desire. So I'll be perfectly honest with you. I am a glorious 56 years young. I have come from a long line of divorces, and not only myself, but from others in my family. And I have not experienced one relationship that was satisfying and beautiful and open. In fact, that it allowed something to expand. So the outer effects is that I actually became very bitter about love. I became very, very unexpecting and just figured those things don't happen. But holding to your inner knowing, my inner knowing always was that love exists in the universe and that someday I would in fact be able to experience a kind of love like that. So a perfect unfolding is what I am actually experiencing in the midst with my partner here on screen, Ken. And so for me, I'll be honest with you, that's the moment that I've given up many, many times, but I had an inner knowing that love existed. And I simply said, it will happen someday, somewhere, somehow. And so I bring that up because I believe that's for all of us. And for me, the Russell work taught me that I fell in love with the museum first, with a body of work that opened my heart and took me to a place of love. And when I was radiating out that love and no longer having given up, and offered that desire of love, that's when it came in. So for me, that was the answer, James. Is that a moment?
That is a moment. That's great. Let me move Ken over
I
here.
can concur with that.
There we go.
moment.
So you can
I
sit
have
beside us, girl.
Same thought.
I mean to tell you,
But
Man,
the key is there was an inner knowing that love has to be there. My mate has to be out there. And that is, in fact, it was just be patient. You're never too old. It is never too late. Don't let your mind tell you that. Walter Russell met Leo Russell at 77 years old. That man lived a life triumphant, and still the love of his life didn't come in until he was 77. Be patient. Love is worth it. It really is.
And so I end with that here this evening because I do find that love happens in many flavors and many ways. For sometimes it's love for the others that are on the panel. For others, it's a romantic love. For others, it's a love for a body of work. And for many of you, it might simply be love for humanity. Love is love wherever it's showing up in the universe, whether we're talking about the science or whether we're talking about the philosophy. And love is what's driving this entire movement of Awaken Your Inner Genius. So we want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. Know that we are sending you lots of love. So may you ride that love wave all the way through your week. We will see you next Sunday, lesson 44, as we wrap up unit 11. Goodbye, everyone.
Can I say one more thing, love?